I believe Mr. George White will lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance, and Mr. Goodall will give our introduction, please.
Before I start, all veterans can hand salute the flag of the United States of America when they go through this process. About 15 years ago, they passed this in Congress, and it's an honor to see the men hand, or the ladies, when they go up on the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
You bow your heads, please. Dear Heavenly Father, we just ask that you bless this meeting tonight. Lord, guard our hearts, guard our thoughts, guard what we speak. Lord, I just pray that the discussion tonight will be in favor of you. And Lord, you will guide us in each and everything we discuss tonight. And Lord, we ask that the Holy Spirit be with us tonight in our discussion. And Lord, I just pray that we can all come to some good decisions tonight. Lord, I just ask that you bless this meeting in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ.
Amen.
The roll call show that we're all present tonight. Is there any conflict of interest of any council members to any agenda item tonight? Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. Is there any conflict of interest from any council member for any agenda item tonight? Okay, if not, we will go to our next item, which is citizen comments. And I do believe we have some signed up to speak tonight. Our first comment is from Ms. Barbara Emmons, who lives on River Road. Barbara. And her little spokesperson.
Couple of things. Going back to the special meeting minutes, and we can't hear you. Going back to the special meeting minutes, March 25th, or March 5th, 2015, and through the council meeting, regular council meeting, April 25th, 2015. Going over the numbers, I understand that we have to pay for the sewer project. I get that. But the numbers that were proposed, when we had a special meeting, when there was a town hall meeting called, people were concerned about the rates for the seniors, how high it would be. The highest that we were told was $12. I believe it was $12.68 per connection. And what they're proposing, or what you're proposing, is the $23.50. Our bill alone for ours would jump from our average 116 to 162. That's a huge increase with the rate hike. That's a huge difference than what they said. The council meeting, it was quoted $1.82 per connection, average of $2 a month. The special meeting, it was quoted the $12.68. That's a huge difference. Somebody made a mistake, and somebody should be held accountable. I mean, when he did these numbers, the city paid him a lot of money to do these numbers. That's a huge mistake on the city's part. I know we've got to pay for it. Am I happy about it? No. Am I happy about another tax increase? No, not at all. Do I want it? No. Do I want to pay this? No. somebody should be held liable for this. I don't know how the city can go about it, but somebody needs to be held liable for this. That's a huge mistake. And the citizens, all of us are gonna have to pay for it.
Our next, thank you very much, Barbara. Our next speaker is Louis Leach. Lives at 7345 Sweet Gum.
First, I'm going to talk to you tonight. Last month, I approached y'all about our fire department down the street. We're still having some calls out here that citizens believe we come out of Beaumont. They believe we're a paid department. We're not. We have no paid members on that department. We have a board of directors that answers to the county, and then we subcontract from them to provide you, the citizens of Bevel Oaks, Northwest Forest, and basically this whole end of the county, fire and emergency services. If you could, please let your neighbors know, we do need volunteers. We do need help. We're not asking for money. We're just asking for help. We do work off your tax dollars. Then also, just to advise you, most citizens wanted a red light down here. Well, just because we got the red light does not make this intersection any safer. Vehicles are not stopping. We're asking you as citizens to please be mindful, even when you have a green light, before pulling out on the 105. Okay, that takes care of that. I'm going to take my fire department hat off now. This goes back to what my next thing is, what Barbara's talking about, Ms. Emmons, on this rate increase. There's 2 cities last time I checked that are the lowest cities for sales tax in Jefferson County. Them 2 cities seem to be in financial trouble. No, they were just on the news about this. Now our city. Before you come to us, the citizens, maybe you can look at the sales tax situation. We do have some businesses out here, maybe bumping it up to what Beaumont's, Beaumont, Port Arthur, Nederland, they're all the same. Nome and Bevel Oaks are ½ cent lower on sales tax than any of the other cities in Jefferson County. Thank you very much, Council.
Thank you, and we will, Kim will put your fire department information together. Thank you very much. Okay, our next person is Ms. Joan Howard. Lives at 390.
Michelle, do you want me to wait until you've given your report? I'm going to give her my report. I think I've heard my report
That
for
she wants to speak. Why don't you go ahead and say what you want to
Yeah,
say?
go ahead.
She'll probably repeat some of your stuff, but that's okay.
I'm Joan Howard, and I head up the Bevel Oaks vaccination clinic, which was going to be this year. Instead of it in October, it's going to be September the 22nd. And that is not just for our residents. If you have family or friends that want to come, please encourage them to. Dr. Schneider, he owns 2 vet clinics. He owns Sour Lake and he owns one in Finette. The one in Finette is the big animal clinic. And last year we had some people, after, we had shots of $20 for rabies, dog or cat. For a cat upper respiratory, a dog or cat was $20 for rabies and $20 for upper respiratory for cat. And there's a 3-in-1 shot, parvo, corona, and distemper for dogs that was $20. So we had people saying that's just too much. They can go to their vet. And so it's hard to explain to these people. You drive through with your animal in your car. If it's pouring down rain, we still do the shots. And so it's a convenience that we don't have any other vet that would come. I promise me, I've asked. And Dr. Schneider comes from Finette, but when in January I asked him about the prices, He said, well, let me think about it, John. He said, the one thing I want you to remember is that the Veterinary Board of Texas is beginning to frown on clinics like we have here, because they would rather the residents or the citizens go to their vet. So he said, you know, we're in kind of a precarious situation where we can be shut down. But he said, let me look at the prices. So when I called him to tell him that instead of October, I was wanting to do it in September, he said, well, I've looked at the prices, and he said from rabies, I'll come down to 15. And from the other shots for the upper respiratory, parvo, corona, distemper, he said, those are going to be 18. And I was so impressed that, and then he told me that he comes all the way from Fannette to do our clinic. I always thought he came from Sour Lake. Anyway, we want to encourage y'all to make sure that everybody knows about the clinic, because I want Dr. Schneider to always have a good feel about coming here. And I was going to tell y'all real quickly, last year we did 78. We did 78 animals, 67 dogs and 12 cats. And the total that we do not keep any of the money, it goes to Dr. Schneider and his group. We brought in 2,740. And I guess more than anything, what I'm trying to say is, in order for this to continue, we've got to make sure that our citizens come out. And you and I will discuss the signs later.
Thank you, John. Okay, that's it. Okay, our next item is to review and approve the consent items. Do I hear a motion to review and approve the consent items as they have been presented to you? In your packet. Okay, motion made by Michelle Nelson, seconded by David Davis. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carried. Our next item is the consideration and approval of adopting the 2016 property tax. You have that over in your packet as well, and you will see that our last year's rate, our tax base last year was $52,157,534, and our tax rate was at the maximum operating rate of 0.235,316 per 100. And our adjusted taxes that was the income was, or expected income, was $121,597, which I think we only can expect to get about 97% of that, which we haven't gotten all yet anyway. So this year's maximum operating rate that they have given us is 0.238272, which amounts to 0.002956 per 100, or about 3 cents per $100 difference in it in last year. So that would amount to, on a $150,000 house, if you would go with that rate this year, it would be a difference of, last year it was $352.97, this year it would be $357.40. So that's the difference in the two rates from last year to this year. So do I hear a motion to approve the maximum operating rate as our tax rate for the year 2016-17?
Make that motion.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, you have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion of that?
Mary, do we have any idea how much this additional tax rate increase is going to bring into the city if we were to collect all of it?
Approximately $9,726 more than we bought than last year, or $131,323. That would, we expected 121. We're hoping to get 121,597. If you multiply that out by the 55,115,43, which is your adjusted taxable rate. Taxable value after. I think we have $483,798 in, or $748 in exemptions that we're allowing: homestead, disability, veterans, what all the stuff, all the things that we allow. So that would come to 131,323, and of course, if you don't get the 97% of that, then it would be less. But the actual difference in that, if you got 100% of each, would be $9,726 difference. So it's not a whole lot of difference, but it's better than going backwards. So that's that.
I don't think that we should raise our taxes this year, and I want to make sure that all the council members understand that this is raising the taxes, okay, like we have every year. We've always agreed to this increase in tax rate. I think there are some council members that were confused and thought that by going to the recommended tax rate, you weren't raising the taxes. Well, yes, you are. You're changing the factors and you're raising the taxes, okay? The other thing is I want to point out that we have one council member here that will no longer live here, so he will not be paying the taxes out here. He's fixing to vote on this, and y'all need to remember that, okay? So, and I'm sure he's going to vote for it.
Okay. Yes.
Nobody likes to have their taxes raised. Nobody likes to have their taxes raised. Nobody likes to pay more money, and I totally get that. Because mine are going to go up as well as everybody else's here. But what we have to remember is the situation that we found ourselves in another budget. If you do not ever increase rates, you will find yourself in a hole. We are responsible for taking care of this city, taking care of its well-being, and if we do not do minimal increases on a regular basis, what you're going to find yourself with is 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, we're going to have to do a huge increase. We don't want to put anybody in that kind of a situation. So being responsible, I think as council members, those minimal increases are what keep our operating budget where it needs to be so that we can take care of the well-being of the city.
I want to respond to that. I totally disagree with that, okay? I think that there are a lot of things that money's spent on out here. We spend a tremendous amount of money on our attorney for the city, for instance. There's just so many cuts that we could make. I mean, why do we want to give them another $10,000 just to waste? I mean,
Well, I believe
if we were
council-
needing it for something, it'd be different. But you're already fixing to get taxed on your water bill and on this per diem or whatever they're wanting you to pay on that. So, I mean,
Well, I believe if you go back and look at the minutes, not too very many months ago, that you were the one who was wanting us to borrow $800,000 to build a park. So now, how in the world will we pay for that? But anyway.
that would
if
be
there's no
having
further-
something.
if
Now, wait a
there-
minute. Now I want to respond to your comment.
I'm just-
Okay, you're pointing fingers, but
No, I'm just saying.
if we were
all the
going to
others.
actually borrow some money to build something and actually have something out here, that would be different. But when you're just throwing another $10,000 in the pot so somebody can, build a 90-foot wide ditch somewhere where we don't need it, or, hey, I think we had one council member propose spending $17,000 or $18,000 trimming trees, so maybe they wouldn't get their motor home on the trees coming in and out of Bevel Oaks. And then 2 weeks later, it came out trimmed all of it.
Okay, I think that's probably covered this. Can we take this to a vote? All in favor of approving this rate, please raise your right hand. All opposed? Motion carried. Mr. Brandino opposes, that's fine, motion carried. All right, the next item on our agenda is the consideration, approval, and adopting of the proposed 2016-17 budget for the City of Bevel Oaks Public Works. And at this time, I'd like to turn the meeting to our accountant, our CPA, Charlotte Yates, and let her go over the budget, let her go over everything. She can probably answer some questions that were raised by some of the speakers. And then she also, at our budget meeting, we had requested that she come try to find some other solutions other than the one that she had presented to us at the last meeting to try to resolve this issue in a way that might be easier for us to handle. So, Charlotte, we will let you have the floor and sure.
Okay, so so I'm gonna try to talk
Charlotte,
about,
excuse me, turn down one more light switch over there, please, the next one to the right.
somebody's calling this. I'm gonna try to talk without the mic, raise your hand if you can't hear me, pretty loud. My name is Charlotte Yates, I'm a shareholder at Edgar Piper and Cross, and the city contracts with us to assist in their accounting services throughout the year. I met with the council last week, they had a budget workshop on the water side of the city, and we discussed a preliminary budget. And I'm going to basically kind of do a shortened version of that, if that's okay, so that there can be some full disclosure. But for council, I want to let you know that we changed two numbers. So on the fees, which are your late fees, your $10 deposit fees, it was originally on the one that we talked about on Thursday, it was $14,000. But looking back at the trend, you really are receiving more. You're already at $16,000 in August or July, and we still had August and September to go through. So I just increased the budgeted amount for fees to $2,000. So $2,000 additional budgeted revenue. But at the end of the meeting, it was pointed out that there wasn't a budgeted amount for chlorine, for the water. So it was indicated that we needed to budget $3,000 for chlorine. So those are two adjusted line items from last Thursday.
We should have a copy of this so we can look at it. We can't see that.
I don't
Larry,
have them.
you can zoom it, I don't know if that will help any.
I'm not gonna go over the budget line item, because that was done with council, at last
Or
week.
did the object,
Maybe if this
Oh,
side was
is
there.
it?
I don't think
I just wanna say the budget meeting last week was an open meeting, when everything was discussed.
If I zoom it, then you lose part of it.
okay.
So I gotta unzoom it. I'm gonna point out one number that concerns all of you. So this column here is the proposed budget. We walked through the line items. I say we, but the city council members, we took it line item and decided on the budgeted numbers. And with the debt included, let me go back. Let me go back one more and I will show you the numbers. Go back. Okay, so we have budgeted revenue of $536,000, $100. Okay, so these are our expenses. This number here, $132,650, is the debt service for the bond. That's the principal and the interest on the bond. This number here, $23,984, is the principal and interest on the meter note payable. There's a new meter system. They have a 10-year note on it. They're in their second year, so there's 8 more years on the meter. So normally, the only part of these notes that hit your income statement, your income and expenses, is the interest part. But because we're budgeting cash flow, we're budgeting the cash that's going to come in and what the city is going to use it, or then we have the whole amount in principal and interest. So we have about $156,000 in debt service payments. And that $156,000 is a major part of this $180,000 deficit. But I want to stress, it's not the whole amount. If we remove the $156,000, you still have a deficit, and that's an operating deficit. It means your income from your billing, your water and sewer sales and your fees are not covering the budgeted expenses. Okay, so you have to remember, so this deficit of $180,000, as I pointed out to council on last Thursday, it's a twofold problem. You have debt service that you now need to pay, but you also are not meeting your operating expenditures with revenue. And I'll point out that this year that we're in, they budgeted, there was a deficit of $33,000 budgeted last year. So what that means is in the budget for this year, it was known that it was likely that there was going to be a deficit, and that means you have to use your retained earnings or your fund balance, your savings. And you can't do that every year. So there's a trend where your operating revenue is not meeting the operating needs. So I just want to emphasize, we have two issues that we're dealing with. Okay, so this was what brought the whole issue to light as to how could we have a deficit when the city thought they were going to have enough money based on the bond, when they were going through the bond process and dealing with the financial advisor, and numbers were being looked at and estimated. As most of y'all probably know, there was an error, and that error indicated there would be surplus funds to cover the debt service. Well, as of this budget workshop, we knew that something was off kilter. And so I'm going to walk through what happened and why, and kind of why it happened, but I'm not going to point fingers. I'm not going to say this was his fault. I'm not going to say, because it was a matter of human error on multiple levels. Okay, so right now, this is where we're at. We have $180,000 deficit. Okay, so we're going to concentrate on the bond right now. Now the bond, discussion of the bond for the sewer plant, for the transition from the sewer plant, really began back in, I think around 2013. They talked about it a lot, but then it really came down to around March of last year when they were finalizing the bond and trying to decide how much debt and where they were going to pay for it. So this, and part of the process of trying to determine how much a city can or a municipality can afford when they're going out for a bond is to look at their estimated cash flow. And so this report is called an estimated system cash flow. This was the initial calculation or estimation from the financial advisor based on 2014 audited financial statements. So they were good numbers, they've been audited, and that was the starting point for the estimate. So, let me see if I can read it. I'm going to give you some numbers just just so in case you can't read it. Okay, so per the 2014 audited statements, there was almost $335,000 in revenue. There was $377,000 in expenses that left a net deficit of $42,783. So in the accounting world, the numbers, in trying to get to actual cash flow versus accrual basis numbers, we know that depreciation, which is a non-cash expense, is included in this number, so it was backed out. This 161, it says add cost reduction estimated by the city. And it says 161,744. Well, those were the costs that the city estimated that they would save by contracting with the city, with Beaumont, to handle their sewer and shut down and no longer be in the sewer business. And so those two are add backs, and you got to a new adjusted revenue, and then the debt payment for the meter was backed out, and there was a transfer from the city had transferred dollars to the water department that year, so that was backed out. And then then there's this subtraction that says sewage treatment charges to Beaumont. And at that point in time, it was estimated to be $179,000. So when you do the math, you get a net available for debt service of minus $12,410. This was the initial estimate. This estimate tells you that the city didn't have the funds or weren't going to have the funds to cover the debt, and so an additional required amount per connection was going to be needed to cover the debt. And the debt that was covering was both the debt for the bond, but they also were throwing the meter payments in there, so that would cover all of the debt service. So it averaged about $24 here. Okay, so this was the initial estimate. And over the next couple of days, information was gone, between the city and the council and the city and the financial advisor. They were going back and forth, trying to make sure they were getting good numbers and making sure that we got a good estimate. Okay, so this is the second round, and here's where some of the here's where the errors were happening. And largely, it was because everybody wasn't looking at apples to apples. They were looking at apples to oranges. And that's where we started having some errors. Okay, so up here, it says for year-end 2015 revenues and expenses. That's 325 and some change, and then the expenses were 238,820. Gave you a net cash flow of $86,000. The depreciation was added back because it was not a cash expense. The reduction, the savings that the city would save going contracting with Beaumont was re-estimated, and now it's at 170, so that was added back. And then the debt service payment for the meter was subtracted out of that available, and then the expected payments to the city, to the Beaumont, were subtracted out, and you got a positive $162,000. And that's positive cash flow, and it covered the debt service. And so that was bit. And the final one, the final estimated cash flow that was used to approve the bond was this one right here. Nothing really changes here. We still have the $162,000 positive cash flow. Really, the only thing that was finalized was the interest rate, which they were able to say, really determine, and it actually reduced the overall payout by about little under 200,000. So overall, the bond that was approved was $1,930,000, and the total payout over the next 20 years is $2,638,000. Okay, so then we come back to here. I'm sorry. So how did this happen? Because this is wrong. And I'll tell you, the first one that we saw that had the negative cash flow, that was a truer picture of where the city stood. The revenue is pretty accurate. The expenses that were provided, that were used, were net of depreciation. Net depreciation wasn't included in that amount at all. So the depreciation shouldn't have been added back. So that's one problem. And then, because the 238 was somewhat adjusted for some of the accounts that the city was gonna realize savings by going to Beaumont. This $170,000 cost reduction wasn't reviewed and adjusted. So this $97,000 shouldn't have been added back. And when I said you're looking at apples to apples, well, the way that the revenue and expenses were calculated for the 2015 estimate, not to say they weren't right, there was a miscommunication of how to look at them. You couldn't treat both sets of numbers the same because they weren't calculated on the same basis. And that miscommunication or lack of communication caused some of the problem. And so this 170 should have been reduced for the further savings that weren't already included in the $238,000 total of expenditures. That's how it happened. Okay, so the city really but this is what was used to base the decision not to raise the rates, and this was the information that was used for the newsletter because this was where the city council thought they were at. Okay. You guys have any questions?
Charlotte, I do.
Okay.
With the two audits that we've had and the bookkeepers, why wasn't this pointed out to us?
Okay, so the first numbers, they were based on an audit. These are based on estimates, and they were mainly based on remember this was in March, and there was only 4 months of actual revenue and expenditures to base the rest of the year on. So that was one, there was pretty good estimates, but there wasn't enough, I guess, eyes looking at it before the information went over to the financial advisor. And then on their end, there was some mistakes on their end that they possibly should have caught. And really, Like, the depreciation was one of them.
Well,
Because they had a detailed, so that's what I'm saying, there's errors. Not just one person, it's not just, there was no intent, there was no deceit, it was unfortunately a series of mistakes.
We have to remember that we were all sitting here looking at all this stuff every time, and nobody saw it.
But it seems like mistakes
You were, we were all here, we were all there, we were all here.
Okay, so let me,
How many files for these mistakes?
Okay, you said that those numbers were based on an audit.
no, not these.
No, but you said
The
the
prior
prior set of numbers. We've had the same auditor out here, people.
It's got nothing to do with the auditor. What it has to do with is these numbers are more cash basis. Cash basis. The estimated revenue that they would actually receive was calculated. The estimated expense based on what was already paid was just printed out. There's no adjustments, there's no accrual adjustments, there's no audit adjustments, there were no depreciation added. They were not adjusted for the accrual basis of counting on, which is what the basis of the first numbers were on. So that's what I'm saying, you can't, you were looking at apples and oranges. And there were significant differences. And those differences caused the error.
May I ask our attorney something?
Somebody should have called it.
Is there anything that we can do about this?
Yeah, we're gonna have to pay for somebody's mistakes.
Okay, now,
That's not right.
let me make one comment, which I heard this several times over the last week, and a council will, I think, verify. But if the bond had been based on this estimate, the very first estimate, the bond would have still been approved. The difference is the conversation that we're having today would have happened last March, because they would have known that there wasn't the funds to service the debt service, and the fee, and at least the fee would have been a reality. Because from what I understand, this bond and the contract with the city of Beaumont was the most cost-effective option for the city to continue to provide sewer services for the citizenry. I believe that eventually, in the not-too-distant future, the sewer plant would have had to be rebuilt, and it would have cost a lot more than $2 million. So I understand. But what you have to realize is that we are at a place, or y'all are at a place, where it would have already happened. And we'd be having this conversation. We would have had.
Not if somebody did their job and caught the mistakes. I
You
would
know what I'm
not
saying?
jail
is
for
They
that.
would have still approved the bond.
So it would benefit back and forth.
Yes, ma'am.
What happened when council votes to raise the rates, to tap this rate, this fee on, plus raise our rates, and people quit using so much water, and the city ain't bringing any money?
Well,
What happens then?
the fee will vary, and that's, I'm gonna get to some options. The council charged me with coming up with some options for how to cover the $180,000. So I'm gonna go over those options, and I think it'll answer some of that, but what you have to realize is what council will, I guess, confirm is, this is the position that the city was in back in March, when they were deciding whether to approve the bond. And based on all their information as to whether the contract with the city and and the money that was required to shut the sewer down and send that sewer over to Beaumont, it was more prudent to go this route. So, again, I think council would have approved this back in March, and you would have had the fee. You would have had the fee,
Oh, I get that.
or some kind of version of it.
I get that, but the big question was, when all this was first talked about, because we had so many seniors out here on a very limited income.
Okay, and
one of
we'll
the
see one of my options.
She's
I
gonna
mean,
get
I'm
to that.
gonna give you an option that will, I think will help mitigate some of the lower end.
There's something I want to point out too. When
I
we
still ask the question to the mayor, I mean, to the.
Oh, yeah, we've already corrected you.
So,
That's about it.
Here, can y'all hear me? Y'all just turn that one off.
2%.
so
This is Drew Montgomery, our attorney.
Drew Montgomery, city attorney. So the question put to me by the council is, all right, so can we hold someone accountable for this, for us now knowing what the reality is? And that can be answered in a couple of different ways. The first is, when all of these, when the decision was made, was a projection. And so every time any of the information and the projections were delivered to us is, we're going to have to see sort of at some point how it plays out. But that's what they said at the time. Even if they had not been wrong and they were later proven wrong on fact. The issue for the city holding financial advisors accountable for it is, there's two questions that you have to ask when you want to sue someone, when you want to hold something when a wrong's been done to you. One, do they owe you some sort of duty that was breached? Did what they do cause you damages? Was there a connection between what they did that was wrong, and was it directly connected to you being damaged? And in this case, the last part of it was what she just referenced is, what were the damages for us not expecting, for getting something that exceeded expectations? Because the reality of it is, the next cheapest option before the $2 million purchase was a $3.5 million purchase. So whether they correctly estimated it or not, it was an inevitability that we were going to incur $2 million or $3.5 million. And so we would have to prove that 40 years into a 30-year-old sewer plant that we would not have spent that money, we would have kept the existing sewer plant, not incurred the debt for the sole reason that a year in the future we would be unsatisfied with the debt. So the damage, it was an inevitability that some money was going to have to be spent, and the harm that they did was just our expectations, not actually causing us to incur the $25 per month user fee, but that we didn't expect it at the time we approved it. And remember, at the time we approved it, everything that they provided to us was couched in, we're doing this off of projections into the future. We have a small sample size of 4 months. Otherwise, we're looking at past audited ones, and the past is only a limited predictor of the future. So we would have to see it play out. So not only was their advice conditioned, where they would say we knew there was some uncertainty and there was some risk with the uncertainty, but then we would have to say we would have to prove, that we were never going to replace the sewer plant. And as we know, we barely made it to this. So the science of whether that sewer plant would have to be replaced, we would fail. It was the next cheapest option to replace the sewer plant was $1.5 million more than that, which obviously did. So it was just to expectations, not to actual money damage to the city, because no matter what, the city was paying some money. We just didn't know what to expect. We were incorrectly told something at that time. So that's short.
If there were several people or several agencies that was involved, why couldn't several agencies pay for the mistake? Us included.
Well, what is the financial wrong that they would pay? What are the damages?
They could refund all the money we paid them for doing the
The
audits and stuff.
commission, no, the audit was the most
Anything that
accurate.
they put together that we paid them for when they made the mistakes, we shouldn't have paid them for. On my job, if I make that kind of mistake, I'm in jail and I don't have a job anymore.
So that would be the commissions that were paid to the financial.
It would mean whoever did not catch the mistakes, who was charged with the task of going over all that paperwork and making sure everything was correct. Not just talking about the sewer and the numbers there. That's not the issue. The issue is, if I'm understanding everybody correctly, that someone in however many hands it was that went over this stuff over and over again as they project numbers and they fix, didn't catch the original mistakes. The over projections or the under projections or whatever that causes this issue to come up now.
Okay.
Somebody was supposed to double check and triple check. I mean, if I don't do that,
Can I put one thing out though? If they had caught it, we would still be having the same conversation.
if they
We
had
would've
caught
had
it a year ago, would that bond still have passed?
It would have changed,
Sure.
it would
It would
have
have
changed.
changed everything.
But if he wouldn't have spent
No, we would've spent $3.5 million
on the extras that he
It would have
got.
changed some things.
It would have changed things.
And my question,
Mayor asked me a question.
Yeah, let him tell us what it was changed.
The mayor asked me a question and I want to answer.
Yeah, what was
Okay.
it?
They have a running bill.
They came in here, first of all, as Ms. Nelson said, the last meeting, that was a public meeting, okay? All y'all that are sitting out there could have been here. Now, here's a point I want to make. There was no forewarning about this happening, okay? That the water bills were going to be doubled or anything. I'm quite sure that y'all would have all been here, okay? This was at least known, at the very least, by your mayor and your mayor pro tem, as they are the ones that got together with the accountant, according to the accountant in the last meeting, okay, before the last meeting, and came up with these fees and rate increases and everything like that. So they knew about that. We have a call system up there that calls all the people. We have a bulletin board in the front. They kept it on the down low. Nobody knew anything about this happening until y'all didn't, until it came out of that meeting last time and possibly on Facebook or whatever.
I believe that she did say that the budget meeting was, didn't you announce the budget meeting? Because we found this out like the week
She
before.
announced the budget meeting, but
Mr.
she did not say that the water bills.
Mr. Marandino, can I change your chronological order just a tad?
Go ahead.
Okay, about a week before last week's meeting, I did meet with, Mayor Pro Tem and Kimberly, and we did come up with the numbers, or actually, they had done some preliminary numbers and we walked through it. And that's when we realized that $180,000
Error.
issue. We didn't even really know kind of why, but we generally knew. I mean, we had this and we kind of looked at it, but that was a week before last. So this whole, please don't say that this was hushed up for weeks or months.
But that's
This
just
was
saying-
over
Weeks, not
2
months,
weeks.
2 weeks.
Okay, but I was charged after that meeting to come to last week's meeting with the options. So that's what happened. And now, after last week, I was charged with coming back with some additional options. And that's what we're eventually gonna go over after all the discussion.
Okay, now our mayor says what could be changed. Okay, here's what could be changed. Before this mistake was made public to everybody, okay? I remember them coming in and say, oh, don't worry about that, because that's all going to be paid for, okay? So, we used probably at least an extra $300,000. We've got a $30-some-odd-thousand power washer down there, okay? We concreted the bottom of a retention pond, thinking all this was free now, people, because we hadn't heard anything about anything going up.
Nothing's ever free.
We hadn't heard anything, let me talk, we hadn't heard anything about anything going up, okay? Because the mistake was there and they hadn't recognized it yet, okay? Now, that money that, in my opinion, that they wasted down there, okay? could have been applied back to the $2.1 million thing. And that's not to mention the mistake that y'all probably don't know about unless you were at the meeting that night and Mr. Frigier had these pieces of pipe that he was holding up in here. Our engineer also made a mistake on the line. The TCEQ would not pass the line inspections, okay? He had to go back and put some more valves in it. It cost tens of thousands of dollars.
$10,000, but.
Just $10,000, only $10,000. But guess who picked that tab up, okay? When that guy made that mistake, he should have had to pay for that. If you're gonna come inspect something that I'm building, I'm gonna build it to the way you expect to find it when you come out and inspect it, okay? That was a mistake on that engineer.
Okay, we will get back to all of
Now,
that.
does that answer your question?
Okay, we will get back to every bit of that. When she finishes this, there will be another time when we will get back to every bit of this, because all of this is going to get disclosed before we leave here tonight, I promise you. Finish what you're talking about, because we do need to get to this.
Okay, we're back to where the city has to fund $180,000 deficit for the budget that they are proposing to approve.
Ms. Charlotte, do you have in this where that we had to start paying interest? Are you going to show that?
We did, well, if you look at the budget, this is, how we approach the budget is we usually look at the prior year because it's complete. And then we look at where we are in the current year and project it out to the end of the year, and that gives us an idea. So we have a 2-year kind of window to look. In this year, the city's already paid 101 whole year of debt service. And then, it's $132,650. That's two interest payments and the principal payment. And then there also is one interest payment that they just paid in August. The interest payments are due February and August. The principal is due February, I think. And just to point out, since the funds of how the money was spent, the bond, it was brought to my attention that when they were budgeting the bond, there was a contingency, and it was a little over $200,000.
About 230, I think.
Okay, so
205, excuse me.
because they were so far into the project and they knew that, and it was disseminated to the council that the likelihood of that contingency being used for the sewer plant was very small. Well, those funds became available for debt service. So out of the 1.9 million, the city was able to use so far 146,000 of it to pay some debt service. And if there's the indication that at the completion of the whole project, there is going to be somewhere between $65,000 and $75,000 left of the bond that will ultimately be applied to the bond debt. So there's the potential of that whole contingency being able to be applied to the debt.
Who makes that decision?
Could have been 300.
There is the,
We talked about it.
within the bond document, it allows, there's wording, or there's allowance for how contingencies, how surplus funds are used. And this was a private fundings, which means there was only one buyer. And so there's not as many restrictions because but it was indicated to council that they could use that contingency money to pay toward the debt, which they did, and they intend to use the rest of it to pay toward the debt. Whatever the remainder is, it will go straight to the debt.
Charlotte, may I say one more thing?
Okay.
The old plant was costing us so much money. I forgot how much it costed for one of these trucks to haul off the sludge, but it was a lot of money. And it was just going on borrowed time. And it was we were going to have to spend this money to do something. And this is the cheaper way to do it.
Okay, so we're back to the $180,000 deficit. 156 of it is the debt service of the two notes. Okay, so how does the citizenry pay for that? Because we really don't pay for it. Okay. Last Thursday, I presented a couple of options, and I made an initial recommendation. So I'm gonna walk through this, and I'll be happy to answer questions afterwards. The whole debt, the total debt again is $156,000. Of that, $132,000 is the bond, and that'll go all the way to 2025. The $24,000, which is the Badger meter debt, that's got 8 more years.
How much?
It's about 24,000, just a tad shy. Okay, so what you have to do is try to figure out how to pay the debt. And these are the assumptions that we agreed to use when we were making the calculations. We estimated 550 connections, and we estimated 26 million gallons of water sold annually. And that does fluctuate. Sometimes, some years it can be 28 million. It's rarely below 26 million, so we were comfortable using the low end. Our goal was to generate enough money with the monthly fee to cover all the debt. And then, remember I told you that not all of that under $180,000 deficit was the debt service. We also have a trending operating deficit that we have to address. And so the service revenue goal was to increase the rate to increase the revenue to where we're at least break even, but really we should be building our fund balance back up, because it's been used in the past for our shortfall. It's been kind of eaten out. Okay, so if we looked at the budget, we went back to the budget, the estimated expenses that included the debt service, it was a little over $500,000. So I estimated, based on 26 million gallons sold, a break-even per gallon rate of almost 2 cents a gallon. Y'all are at 1 cent a gallon right now. That's where you're at. And currently, your minimum bill is $30, and then these are what the current rates are per gallon. Okay, so my initial recommendation on Thursday was this one right here. And that is the $23.50 fee, which if you multiply it out annually, it will cover or be just, less than $1,000 short of your total debt service, principal and interest on both notes. It would cover the debt. Now, this debt is $156,000 through for the next 8 years, and then it's going to drop down. So it was also my recommendation that this rate be reevaluated at the end of year so that it can be lowered to just cover the bond for the next so many years through 2015, 2025. And if it was reduced and it was just covering the bond, it could be reduced to $20. Now, the debt, if this debt service fee is approved, then part of the approval is that the revenues that are generated are restricted for the debt. So if there's a surplus, a little surplus at any year, because as your principal gets paid, your interest goes down, so your debts, your annual payment is going to decrease. Then it's potential that the money can build up a little bit of interest, it's stuck in interest bearing, and if it was decided that after 8 years to keep it at $23.50, the additional revenues that would be generated could be used toward maybe early payoff of the debt after once you're allowed to pay it off early, but at the very least it would build a cushion so that if something happened, you have some restricted revenues to pay debt in, a situation where you may have a hurricane or whatever. So this is a little somewhat flexible. It's pretty much set for 8 years at least, but then the city can reevaluate it and decide how they wanted to handle it after the Badger meter was paid off. Okay, so that takes care of $156,000 of that $180,000, but we have to still deal with the deficit on the operating side, and the way that is done is with a rate increase. Now, there hasn't been a rate increase since before the city took over BOMUD back in 2010. So I think the last one was in 2008. And we're in 2016. So you've gone 8 years without a rate increase as your expenses have increased. Cost of living increases are 3 to 4% every year. So in the first couple of years, it might not have been as noticeable, but with that rate still being at the 2008 rate and your expenses being at the 2015 and 16 and 17 rates, that's why we're noticing the difference now. So it's like we have to do a catch-up in the rate increase because we haven't had one, which is not really prudent. Rates should be reviewed every couple of years at the very least, and you would expect a small cost of living increase, and that hasn't happened. So, subsequently, I'm recommending a 20% increase, which is 2/10 of a cent. 2/10 of a cent. So instead of a penny a gallon, you're paying 1 2/10 cents of a gallon. But that 2/10 of a cent per gallon at, say, 26 million gallons sold, the expectation is you're going to have about $50,000 more in revenue. It's all going to be driven by how much gallons are sold, so it could be a little bit less, it could be more. But $50,000, if you go back to the budget, will cover the shortfall and leave a surplus. So that was my recommendation, and this is how it would affect the rates. So at the $3,000 minimum, 3,000 gallon minimum with the fee, there would be a $6 increase in the minimum bill with the $23.50, so the minimum bill would actually be $59.50. And then it walks forward. Well, the discussion was, what other options do we have, and how is this And so I looked at just 1 month, and there was a little less than 200 customers, connections, that paid the minimum bill. Of those and I think it fluctuates because of usage. It's probably between 180 and 200 customers that normally pay. Don't quote me on that, but you have to go look at several billings, but I'm pretty confident it just hovers around 200. There's about probably 40 or 50 of those that have less than 1,000 gallons of water, and then there's a chunk that have less than 2,000, and then there's another chunk that are between 2 and 3. So that was a concern. And then there was also a question about, well, what if we lowered the rate? What if we lowered the debt service fee, and how would that affect? Because we still want to get out of the deficit hole. So then someone asked if we had a 25% increase with the 2350, what would that do? And that would raise around $65,000 of operating revenue, but it would also increase the minimum bill to $61, which is over 100%, over. Okay, so that's that option. And then the question was, what if we lower the debt service fee and we pass the difference on through a rate increase? The question was spread it out. Well, this one here starts the debt service fee at $20, and that $20 will cover the bond debt, but it won't cover the meter debt, the $24,000, that's the meter debt. And so the meter debt would have to be paid out of the operating fund, and so you would have to increase the rate, your water rate, 30% to 1 3/10 to get to a break even. It comes out about the same, 59, you're just shifting money. This is another option. It's a $15 debt service, but you have to have a 45% rate increase to break even. And actually, you'd probably break even. And this one's really not feasible. It's a $10 rate monthly debt service fee. It would go up 60%. And again, it comes out to about the same, between $58 and $59, whichever way you juggle the numbers. So I'm still recommending this with an adjustment to the minimum. So the alternate recommendation is still the $23.50, still the 20% rate increase, which is 1 2/10 But I'm recommending, I'm just throwing this out there, the minimum usage could be lowered to less than 1,000 gallons. So what that does is it throws anybody that uses less than 1,000 gallons into the new minimum, which would be $12 for the water and sewer, and then they would have the $23.50 debt service fee. So their minimum would be $35.50. So anyone that was paying the $30 that used less than 1,000 gallons, their increase would be $5.50. A lot easier than 59. Okay. So with that being the minimum, then you would have a new range, anyone from 1,001 gallons to 2,000. They on their usage. So this is if someone had 2,000 gallons. So, the maximum they would pay would be $24 for the use of their water and sewer, the $23.50, so their total bill would be $47.50. Now, anybody between 1,000 and 2,000 would be paid somewhere in between $35.50 and $47.50. The people that are at between 2,000 and 3,000 would pay somewhere between the $47.50 and the $59.50, and then everybody else would just be recalculated. Be the same. It'd be the same from 6,000 on. So this is the same recommendation, except we're adding a new minimum, which eases some of the burden for the ones that are at the really low end of usage. What this option gives up compared to this option is between $2,000 and $4,000 of total revenue. Because you were making a little profit, additional profit for those that were paying 30 but didn't use nearly that much. So this is new for tonight.
So we would not have a minimum water bill.
Yes, you have $1,000
1,000 gallon minimum.
Yes, right. And that gets it pretty close for those that are on that end to what they were paying. They have a $5.50 increase. And then, like I said, this 2,000 is $47.50, but anybody in between, it's going to be after 1,000, it's per gallon. So plus the $23.50. So because this covers and makes the most sense, this alternative just eases that burden on the lower usage connections.
And who has to keep up with this? Is that Kimberly?
There's a question was how many meters are in this category. The one month that I counted them all, there was about 180. But it'll fluctuate because somebody can go over 3,000 quite easily. So I'm thinking that you're helping, somewhere between maybe 170 to a little over 200, somewhere in there. And right now, there's 559, or close to that, connections that are billed. So a little over a third would be the benefit.
I just wanted to clarify that if you have 2 meters, one that maybe runs your watering for your lawn and your landscaping, you will only pay that fee on one. Nobody will be double billed that fee, so you won't pay it on both bills or on both meters. I just want to make sure everybody's clear on
You
that.
would just get the water.
Yeah, it would just be one time.
It's per household.
Per household, not per meter.
Well, what's the rate gonna be on the second meter?
The
think it's-
Water.
I think it's still
You're
billed.
going up on.
About 20%.
So instead of being in your
I got
secondary
several
meter,
hands, so.
Did I understand you correct, that you said we might have 60,000 from the bonds, that we would be able to put toward the bond debt?
Yes, but
Okay, would that would not alter the
It
157?
basically, so the goal, I think, is, the intent is the rate would go into effect the first part of the fiscal year. The next payment due would be in February, and I think that the project is gonna be complete, so that money that's left is gonna be put in a special fund. So it's kind of like you get an automatic funding of the debt service. And then this $23.50 will be added to that. And so you already have a cushion. But the problem is the next payment's due in February, and it's an interest and principal payment. So really, that's $60,000, and whatever was collected October to February is gonna be used, and so it'll probably be all used up. But it does provide a cushion in the fact that it's gonna take a whole year to collect the debt service, and it's gonna be paid when it's due. So there's gonna be some cash flow issues for when those payments are due. They'll probably have to tip into the savings and then, you know. So, but yes, whatever's left over from the bond that they didn't use should be put directly into a bank account that is restricted for debt service. And it'll be available for the next payment.
Now, you said that we didn't want to point fingers, it was just a human error.
Well, the reason I said that is because I think there was miscommunication in more than one level.
Well, what I'm saying is, if the city paid the financial advisors to come up with, and I do understand what Drew was saying, no, we haven't been out the money.
Right.
We're just,
You just
looking.
delayed, and you would have known about it.
But, you know, this is a trust factor.
I know.
I mean,
We need to get a second opinion on that.
Okay, so at the bottom of these estimates, it says calculations above or based on water and sewer estimated provided by the city and an average interest rate which is. There is no assurance that estimated cash flows presented here will be realized and therefore subject to change. The city cautions that net revenue estimates are made without the basic of operating history of the new improvements and its meters, which may affect actual operating results.
well, I understand that no one can say, well, we're gonna have this amount of gallons used in 1 month in this entire residential. But when you say they compared apples to oranges, and I'm not pursuing, but you would think at least we ought to get our money back for what they paid, because they were trusting people to be professionals, and they.
I think that would be something that legal counsel would have to decide whether it was prudent and cost effective to pursue. Because what you have to remember, at the end of the day, you're back where you would have been last year. Because they would have issued the debt. Yeah. Can I get this young man back here had his hand up?
Okay, I haven't seen your numbers and stuff that you've got there on the bottom. I can't see them from here. But are you saying here on these numbers then that based off of the usage of water is the rate that you will pay?
No.
Okay.
No, the
That was
total,
one of the issues and stuff that was brought up last week for our lower income people, okay, that are on fixed incomes, that we want to try to relieve as much burden as possible on them.
yes.
Okay, for these people, and I'm one of them, that uses more water than other people, why should we not be paying a higher rate?
Do a flat rate per gallon.
So there is a flat rate per gallon.
But I'm saying make it a flexible rate per gallon, progressive for the higher users.
Well, I mean, that's something to consider, but I think that
Would the rate go down?
I think what it.
So the
I
rate
think-
would stay lower, like she's saying right now, 0.001002% on the water for your lower users, right? Am I right on those
And
numbers?
then have an increased rate for
Right.
higher users.
People that are using 3,000 gallons or more would be like a 0.00105.
Well,
I mean, why do you want to do that? Because the numbers at the way she's got them set right there, 20% increase in
That's
the
a
water
across the
sewer
board.
rate
That's a
will raise the money, and at the same time, it's accomplishing what several brought up. It's accommodating the people on the fixed income scales that are lower water users. If it's accommodating them as well, so I don't understand why you're wanting to put a. Just
That's our question.
Okay,
Doug,
that's what I don't
I know
understand.
you can't see the numbers,
I
so
know.
what I'm gonna tell you is that if you are a 1,000 minimum user, your bill goes up $5 a month. So if you use at that level, we are helping that level by lowering the minimum. So
Okay,
there's
for somebody who uses 9,000 gallons a month.
Now, if you use 9,000 gallons a month, your bill is gonna go up by about $40.
And then
So, I mean, as you go up, your bill does go up.
So where's the regressive part in that?
Well, there is,
Based off of
just
flat
use
rate.
it.
Flat rate. Okay.
Does, if, you know, if we can ever get this thing under, you know, where it needs to be,
Right.
I think that, I mean, I would like to see us be able to offer, you know, someone who comes in and shoves us their income tax or whatever and says, you know, here I am, you know, really truly not financially able to pay this. You know, how do we do enrollment in the other places where they actually didn't have, you know, a program to give people a little bit of reduced rate by whatever proof they make them give.
And that's fine. That's
I think
fine.
that would be a good thing if we could do
Something
that.
we can put in place to help our.
That's what I'm
basic
saying.
need.
Somebody that's got, or, you know, they've got special needs or whatever, I would love to see us be able to do that, but we've got to get financially where we can do it.
well, the thought was to be as equitable as possible. There was discussion about having no rate, no debt service rate, and have it all in your water. And so that would make it even more burdensome. Well, it would be totally based on usage. And so that was one of the discussions. And I think they settled on the flat rate for the debt service. So, yeah.
I may just leave it over this, but your lower number, where you're paying for the gallons that you use, is there gonna be an increase on payment for somebody or something coming out there and looking to see what you use? If this has been in there, if we're having to pay something, somebody, a company or whatever, and this is not going to be, oh, we forgot this expense, that we have to have somebody or some company now come read all this stuff.
No, it's budgeted, your meter reading is budgeted. You contract with some,
No, nobody does that anymore.
Right?
now, I think that's what I'm understanding is,
Yeah.
meter is read by contract company.
It's electronic.
And it's, yeah, that's what the new meters are for.
It's read by cellular service.
So, council, I'll answer any questions, but this is my recommendation, or this is just, not my recommendation, but this is the option that keeps the revenue that we need for the city needs, but also affords some relief for the lower end customers that are on more of a fixed income. And there is a cost to do this, but it's to me, it's minimal in that it helps those keep that as much affordability as possible. Because you are giving up some revenue by lowering the minimum.
May I ask Kimberly a question? Kimberly? Do we have a program that will figure this out for you, or do you have to do it individually?
No, ma'am, we have a program that does, it. All I have to do is adjust it in the system and it'll automatically.
So my understanding is if you guys decide to reduce the minimum rate from 3,000 to 1,000 to help out those who need it, which is fine, that means that the people that were now that use about 3,000 gallons a month, which I'm in that bracket, that means my rate's gonna go up because now I was minimum, now I'm not part of the minimum. So the minimum's reduced, so I'm up 3,000. But to me, I understand, this goes back to when we're gonna have to get the roads fixed out there, we had the $8 tip burden tax, and they're gonna hang us all, okay? It goes back to, it's $8, and now that same $8 is now 23. To reduce the debt, we gotta get this done. So, I understand, okay? But, you're just switching Peter to pay Paul, and ultimately, Paul's gotta get paid, and we've gotta do the whole thing.
It is what it is. Don, I think you're missing something. The people that pay for 3,000 gallons or more, they're gonna be paying the same under this plan regardless. If if we lower the minimum rate to 1,000. If you're using 3,100 gallons a month, which is about what I'm doing, you're gonna pay the same whether or not we do the last option at the bottom of the page or the second one at the top. Just do it.
But the reality is, if you pass this, you know, if they approve the new minimum, and you calculate what your percentage increase is, it's kind of like a bell curve. You know, these are gonna, you know, their percentage increase is gonna be less. The highest percentage of increase is gonna be around the 3,000 because there's no wiggle. There's nothing that you can do, and then that percentage decrease is a little bit because they're paying more, they're using more and paying more, but the difference, that percentage goes down. It's almost like there's really not a way to make an adjustment at the old minimum. I mean, their rate goes up $6, but yes, you are hit with the 23, so you're just looking at here, this is almost 100% increase by virtue of but then that 100% increase starts going down, and then it starts going down over here. I don't know a way to correct that.
Earlier, if I understood you correctly, you said it wasn't feasible to reduce that 2350.
Well, it wasn't feasible to go down to $10.
Wasn't feasible to go down to $10, but here's something that could be done. If you went down, it looks like to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but every $5 you went down, you went down from 2350 to 20. Okay? And when you did that,
the reason I did that is because the $20 covers the bond debt. Okay, so if you go down, if you just have the bond debt covered by your monthly fee, then you have that operating deficit of about, you know, anywhere, just say it was $25,000 deficit. But then you also have to pay this $24,000 that's not covered. And so now you're more at a break even, and you're not going to build your surplus.
okay, now, but if you went down, okay, and that was without going up on the rate.
And that's, yeah, if you don't go on the rate, then your revenue is not going to be where it needs to be.
Well, you did go up on the rate. You went to .013, you went up to 30%.
I went up on it so that you could get to back to break even. I had to raise it so that you're back to break even.
Correct.
If you left it at the 20% and lowered it to $20, you'd be in a deficit.
But that would knock another $3.50 off of this
But you'd
$35.50.
be in a deficit and you'd be using your fund balance.
Well, but your rate's gonna go up.
We have a certain amount of money that we have to bring in, so
Or
she
you-
used these figures to bring in that total amount of
And
money.
she did, she raised the rate when she lowered the thing. You
But
raised
it
it.
comes out to the same,
Comes out to the same amount, so it doesn't hurt you, it doesn't
No,
give you
but
less
then
money.
you're stuck with a 30% rate increase to build on. And I don't think you need a 30% rate increase right now.
And if she did
It's
drop
the
it
same
down.
amount of money.
But you're gonna build, but every couple of years, you're gonna increase your rate because you're gonna have to.
I think this is more in line with what Mr. Emmons asked a while ago, if it would be a progressive increase. This definitely would be, if you went up 30% on that, but you reduced that by 350, that would be a
A
progressive.
progressive increase is when the more gallons you use, the higher the rate you pay. That's a
Exactly.
progressive
So
increase.
you have to.
None of these are a progressive increase.
And I don't know if that's fair, that's something that you would have to go back and reconsider.
Well, one of the things too, if you look, most everybody's paying attention to the 3,000 gallon minimum. But you take a 20% increase, which is 2350, you go out, let's say you pull out the 12,000. 12,000 gallons, Charlotte, what is that bill on 12,000?
167.
Well, this is 167.50.
Okay, you lower the fee down to $15 with a 45% increase, what does the bill go to on 12,000?
145, it goes to 189.
So there's a significant increase on the people who use more gallons.
And we have a lot of people that use 9,000, 12,000, 15,000, you'd be surprised. I have the list,
And it's still double the minimum.
well, wouldn't it?
It's still double that. It didn't help them in any way, shape, or form.
No, and the minimum hasn't really changed.
But wouldn't it, this happen, this is why I wanna think long term. Most people think it's short term, how it affects you right now. But in the long term, if you leave the rates at 20% increase, over time, you're gonna stay at 20, maybe 30%. But if you start off low, and you're gonna have to raise your rates, we're all gonna be back in here again, because now we're gonna have to raise our water rates to $50% to cover the cost, because costs go up. So if you don't adjust it now, if you don't do it now, and I know that's a hit, okay? I know it's a hit, but the best thing to do is to leave it like it is, or do the 1,000 minimum, whatever it is. But you gotta pay the water rate of $1.20. If you don't, I'm telling you, costs will go up, and there's nothing you can do about it. So the more you put off the cost, the worse it's gonna get.
I
Then
believe
we're all
it's in
being
our, I believe it's in our best interest to keep, I believe it's in our best interest to keep the fee covering the bond and the payments that we have to make. That way it's very clean. This is going to this, and you know that every single time. That's what that money's for. And when it's paid off, it goes away. If we increase our water rates to 0.006, which is a 60% increase, you're gonna have to hope that in 25 years, the next council that's up here is gonna turn around and reduce your water rates again. And guess what? They're not gonna. So don't you don't wanna go up to that rate. I wanna keep the fee covering the cost. The rate is the rate, the fee is the fee. And it's all even.
When we first moved out here in 1993, there was a $25 debt fee. And I don't remember if it was for the water plant or if it was just, whichever it was, but you know, that was there, and it paid off not too many years afterwards, and it went away. I don't remember what our water rate was, but it did go away. And that's what this would do too. But we all knew that. We knew that that was going to go away. And it was there for a purpose. So, you know, our water bills were a little higher at that time, but now they're lower than anybody else's. So, anyway.
You know, originally when the sewer plant was built, it had to be paid for, and therefore, citizens were assessed, to help pay. And I've been out there since '98, and I didn't know we had a rate increase. But we desperately needed a new sewer plant. George Bryant, and Ned Long, and Danny, and several other people went all over the place trying to get prices on sewer plants, which far exceeded this that we're paying. And it has to be paid for. I want sewer service. So, you know, we've got to pay for it. And I really don't see where it's such a big deal. And I'm old to trying to say.
Well, the bottom line is that we're gonna be in debt if we're already, there's really no choice. It's gonna switch thing, you decide, and you've decided 2350, it's gonna break even.
It's gonna cover the debt
It's gonna
service.
cover the debt.
Well, you might as well vote on it and be done with it, because it's gonna have to happen.
Exactly.
Now, how do we keep it in place that when we vote on it, this money will go?
There will have to be, when we vote on it, there will have to be an ordinance or resolution that says, just exactly like our road user fee, the road user fee had an ordinance. It said that it was designated for that. We have to do the same thing with this. It's designated.
It's
That's
required
right.
to go to
That's
it.
right.
It has to go to it.
It has to do this, and
Yeah, I've seen a lot of things in the cities that said it has to.
well, I can tell you one thing.
It's going someplace else.
The road user fee is still in the bank under road user fee. It's not been used for anything but that, and this will be the same way, so. No, the money's still around. We still got money. No, we stopped collecting it, but the money has been there, and it's not all used up yet, but it's only because that's all it's been used for. Because we've been able to get grants, and so we've been able to save it, but it can only be used for that.
Was it not our auditor's job to review these
It's
things?
not,
No.
it's the financial
The guy that
advisor.
ran out here that night.
No, it was a financial advisor that was hired, and he was a special financial, he had, the bond people required that we had this person. He'll never work for us again.
So our auditor wouldn't look over this kind of stuff.
I don't think so.
I don't believe
We don't think so, or we don't.
Charlotte,
so.
the estimated utility sewer cash flow that our bond advisor did for us, that's not something that the state auditor would look over whenever he did the audit, is it, or is it?
You mean the city auditor?
The city
The
audit.
one we hired.
No.
I mean, he would have never looked at that, that would have been not part of his job.
This was something that
That
had to
was
go
it
for-
was
to sell the
internal.
bonds.
It was internal with the city, working with the bond, the financial advisor, to find you a private placement bond and the council and the financial advisor work together.
Well, in spite of the error that he made, the man did, we never had a rating or anything. I mean, we never awarded any money. So he, he first thought he was gonna get 3.5%, which was not a bad rate. But he wound up getting us, a rating of an A, which was wonderful as a first-time rating. Plus, he got us a 2% interest rate. So
And that's the difficulty in Sunderman, is
Yeah.
that the bulk of the fees associated with him, he fulfilled that. He went, and they exceeded expectations on the interest rate. We did not know whether,
we didn't even know we'd get.
we didn't know if we'd be able to do private. He also, by doing so, we also saved a substantial amount of fees in preparing ourselves for a public bond offering. So their argument would be that they fulfilled what they were hired to do, and that's also another difficulty in pursuing.
Would it be out of the question to get a second opinion on that?
What's that?
I mean, is that your opinion on what we would not be able to do? Or is that something that maybe if we looked into a different attorney that maybe specialized in something like that, would that be something that they could help us with? Because I know, there's been a lot of things that we corrected when you said that we could or couldn't do this, that, or the other, and, it changed.
I think everybody is missing the point that the mistake was made, didn't cost us any more money. It would have been the same thing, we'd have had this same discussion in last March. According to the first analysis that he did, it showed that we needed about $24 a connection, and it varied by year, but we needed about $24 a connection. Now, that was the right assessment. Then there was two different ones that errors were made in. But the bottom line is, in March of last year, we needed $24 a connection to pay the debt service fee. And that's what we're talking about today. The only difference is a year has passed, and we've lost out on collecting that debt service fee and these increased water rates for a year, because if we'd had this discussion last March, we would have enacted these same exact things we're talking about tonight, and we would have already had the money in the bank to pay the notes and take care of the debt service. Now, luckily, as she mentioned, and maybe wasn't quite clear, we've been able to use $148,000 of the bond money that we didn't spend on the project. Well, so combined with the fact that we thought with these last two projections that we got that we were going to have time because we thought we had a positive cash flow, combined with the fact that we knew we had $205,000 in contingency money that we did not think we were going to have to spend, we thought we had time, as I wrote in this sewer project update that maybe some of you will remember, and it's still online, you can go and read it. And everything that was said in there was based on these cash flow analyses that he did. We'd seen the one that said $24 a month we need, then we came back with two that said something different. Well, I wrote this article and I sent it to our attorney to edit for correctness, and I sent it to our bond counsel. to edit for correctness. Both said it was correct, we sent it out. That's what this article was written on, based on these analyses. Now, we had a flaw in it. Again, the only difference in the flaw was the time frame that we're talking about, instituting the rate increase. That's the only difference that's made. Yeah, I get it, everybody wants to point the finger and be mad at somebody. There's nothing to sue anybody over. All he did was prolong the bad news for a year. The bad news was last year. It just got glossed over. That's the only difference. The only difference. We would have had to do all these things last year. Now, if we'd have done this last year, we would have collected this extra money for a year, and we'd have had more operating capital due to the $205,000 in contingency that we maybe wouldn't have spent on that. We could have kept it to use for only debt service payments. That's all that money could be used for. So we could possibly have stretched out the $24 that he said we needed back then. Now we might have could have used that $205,000 to make it only a $20 a month assessment fee or a $15 a month, and use that to dribble in through the years, because that's all it can be used for as debt service payment. But that is the only difference that this hoo-ha has made, is that we're a year late in starting this procedure.
And it's very important to remember that he just said that there's $100 and something thousand that we're able to use out of the bond money. I think you said 60-something thousand,
I
right?
think it's close, well, I don't know, that, I thought it was 60 to 70,000.
That's what you said. He said 100, and how much did you use?
But that,
We have used
These are all
thus far.
estimated figures, none of these are exact numbers, these are all estimated figures, just nobody has
it
any.
depends on what's left when the last invoice is paid.
We have used thus far $148,000 and change to make 3 payments on our mortgage payment, if you will.
Okay.
The first one was $16,000 and something last August for interest only, and in February we paid $102 or $103, and then just the other day we paid another $28. Now, of the bond money, when all the bills are paid, we still think there's going to be another $65,000 to $75,000 left over that we can use to put towards the next mortgage payment, which comes due in February. It's going to be sharp by some amount, the difference between whatever we have left, $60,000 to $70,000, and the $103 or $102.5 that we owe. So that's what we hope to collect between October and December to put with that $60,000 or $70,000 to pay that $102 or $103 payment, $1,000 payment in February.
And the point that I was trying to make was that money that's left over out of that bond money that we didn't spend, okay, can be used to pay this debt service down, correct? Now, had we have known that we were going to have this big shortfall and stuff, maybe some of the people here, I'm not included in that because I voted against it every time, but maybe some of the people here would have said, maybe we don't need to spend $200 and some thousand dollars for concrete at the bottom of this pond. That could have all went right into that. That could have all.
Did you catch the mistake in March?
I'm talking
Yes
right
or
now.
no?
I'll tell you in a second.
You did not
I'll
catch the
tell you
mistake
in a
either.
second.
So stop pointing fingers.
That money could have been used, that money could have been used to pay down the debt service. The $30-something thousand power washer that we have down there, that $30,000 could have been used to pay down the debt service. Just wanted to point that out. And no, I didn't, but we had a banker that ran as mayor as a banker. We had an auditor come in.
Everybody who
We had another guy come in.
It just is what it is. Nobody caught it. Everybody looked at it. Nobody saw it. You can't point fingers on it.
Do you have anything else you want to say?
I'd like to address Mr. Marandino's assertion for the last year that we needlessly spent $175,000, and he uses numbers from $200,000 to $300,000 in his Facebook post, but it was $175,000 to concrete line the bottom of the pond, and then I have the numbers right here on the bid.
The engineer told me.
Here it is, right here.
Mr.
Alternate
Mayor,
item number one.
Councilman Marinino, would you please let him speak?
The alternate bid item to concrete line the bottom of the pond was $175,104 from MK Constructors, our contractor. So all those numbers you've been throwing out for the last year are wrong.
And you had another bid that was $40,000.
It was from another contractor, but this isn't a pick and choose when you go out for bids. You pick a contractor and his bids, or if you don't like his bids, you pick another. You can't pick this one's low number and this one's low number, so that's just not the way it works.
You can when you add on to it.
Excuse me, can y'all just go ahead with what? No,
Thank you.
I think it's important that this be clarified once and for all, because this discussion needs to end.
Okay, so the whole purpose for concrete lining the bottom of this pond, which was explained to everybody in about 3 or 4 different meetings, was because the engineer and the past utility operator that we had told us that it was very likely we were going to have sediment that collects in the bottom of this pond. It was originally designed to be a grass bottom pond. Listening to both of them, they said that if you can afford to do it, they recommended that we do it because there's going to be sediment built up in the bottom of the pond after each rain event. And based on the numbers from 2013 that the engineer used, he said that the pond at that time would have had water in it 10 to 12 times for about 8 to 12 days at a time. So, our pond has not been put into operation on our own account. The other day, last week, during this rain event, you can see this device right here. That's called a balloon. And what it is a pipe plug. It goes in the end of that pipe right there, and it's aired up. They put it in the pipe, they air it up, it acts as a plug, thank you. So anyway, that thing had been in that pipe for the last year, keeping the water out of the sewer system from entering this pond. How did water get in this? Well, every time it rains, all the water in the ditches seeps into our sewer collection system, and it runs down to the sewer plant, and we were pumping it into the sewer plant, going straight into Pine Island Bayou, not being treated because there was no other choice. This happens all over the state, happens all over the country. So, we were not ready to put this pond into operation. We had that plug in there. Well, it blew that plug out. Now, you can see the water line right here where the water was. Right now, that pond's got 2 feet of water in it. How do I know that? Because in the next picture I'm going to show you, when the water is drained out of here, you'll be able to see the concrete where it goes up the bank for a height of 2 feet. Now, so the pond only had about 4 feet of water in it. It went down, and then the water level came back up, and the water stopped draining out, and then it went down again. So this was taken Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. Well, I got to tell you, I was surprised. I did not expect it to be so lush and green looking, shall we say. All right, so the next day, the water had drained out of the pond. Notice the green sludge and slime that covers the entire area of this pond. Now, this is a silt fence. That silt fence was put there because the grass has not filled out. It's easier to see over here on these 3 sides. The grass has not grown, it's not come in, if you will. So a silt fence was put there to keep this silt from running down the bank and getting into the pond if we had a rain, or when we had a rain event. We weren't supposed to have sewer water in the pond anyway. Well, so this is what happened. That thing blew out. You can see there's a green layer of slime all the way across the pond. Now, how deep is it? Well, let's just go over here. Now, all right, I'm going to back up one. Okay, so you will notice that down the middle of the pond, catty-cornered from one end to the other, there's a trench. Well, so the concrete slopes toward the trench and collects the water, and it runs down that trench and it runs into that pipe that we were looking at a while ago. Now, this is that trench where you can see the sludge and debris that has collected in the bottom of this pond. Water was only in this pond 4 foot deep, about that high, for only a period of 4 to 5 days. We're not sure right now because I haven't been able to look at the chart reader yet. But just think of what that would look like if it had 8 to 10 feet of water in it for 8 to 10 or 12 days. Now again, I told you the hydrological data they looked at is from 2013. If you will recall, in 2013, we were in a drought here. Now, we had hard enough rains during 2013 that they said we'd have water. So there's no telling how many times in 14 and 15, when we started having wetter winters and summers and springs, how many times we'd have had water in there. Okay, so this is the stuff that if we had a grass bottom pond, would just stay on the bottom. Over time, grass would grow up through it. We would cut the grass, and that stuff would continue to build. And at some point, we would have to go in there, and in a grass bottom pond, the only way to get that stuff out when it built up to where it got higher than that pipe that we saw down here now, is to dig it out with heavy equipment and get it out of there. And then all that material has to be treated as sewer sludge, which means you have to pay somebody to take it to a landfill. Now, let's go down here. Okay, now, I'm sorry that I had to get close up. There's things here that you shouldn't have to see, but nonetheless, you can see that the water has drained out, and you can see that an animal has tracked through this stuff. Here's one here. They're all over. So I didn't get down there and measure how thick it is, but there is some depth to the amount of sludge, sediment, and debris that's in the bottom of this thing. Now, the bottom of this pond is a little over 24,000 feet, and that comes right off the contractor's pay estimate, which I have on my desk right there. If this stuff is only 1/8 of an inch thick, for 20, and by the way, 24,000 square feet is just slightly over half an acre. Slightly over half an acre. If that material is only 1/8 of an inch thick, there's 9.13 cubic yards of sludge sitting there right now. Now, in the trench that runs down through here, if I back up one, you can see it's pretty thick in places here. I just took an average of 1 inch thick. That trench is 210 feet long, it's 6 feet wide, it's 6 inches deep. I just said, okay, if it's only 1 inch deep, how much material is that? 3.7 yards. So there's between 12 and 13, if that's 1/8 of an inch, and I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying, if that's 1/8 of an inch, there's a dump truck, a 12-yard dump truck load full of material sitting out there right now. Now, this highfalutin water pressure, or pressure washer that he's mentioned that we had, so we realized at some point the water pressure out there at the sewer plant was not suitable to wash a 1/2 acre of land. So we had the engineer design us. This is that, you're wrong, it's not 30, it's about $40,000. But, yeah, but we have not spent any money outside of the original bond. We were able to repurpose money that we had in the bond that we didn't use for other things. We used it for this. Now, we did approve up to $15,000 to build this system. So this is a 1,500 gallon tank, and you can see water running into it. This is a high pressure pump, the control panel for it. It's got high pressure piping that goes out to the pond, and it goes to 2 different corners of the pond. Well, so the engineer determined that, well, first of all, let me go over one more here. Now, so I spoke with our fire chief here about this problem of we needed something that we could use to wash down this pond with, he suggested a booster reel, which the firemen use, and they have on their trucks that they use to fight brush fires with. It's got a 1-inch hose on it. It's got a reel that rolls up on. Here's where the high pressure water comes from that pump I showed you, and we've got it connected to the other side of this reel right here. Now, this hose goes out. This is a 100-foot piece of hose, and I'm going to show you in a minute. The engineer determined, he calculated, and then we tested it before we built it, that it was going to require 200 pounds of pressure on the water on the line starting back at the pump. By the time we went through friction losses in the water running down here and going through this hose, it was going to require 200 psi pressure at the pump and about 40 GPMs of pressure of flow to be able to wash this thing down. Well, like I told you, we tested this first because our current utility operator is an ex-volunteer fireman from Silsbee. He had access to a fire truck that had a booster reel on it. Well, it turns out on fire trucks, they can adjust the pressure as well as the flow. So he and his dad went out one Saturday at the fire department in Silsbee. They took the booster reel and they tested it at about 45 pounds of pressure, because that's the most pressure that we would have we'd have about 50 pounds at the plant. By the time it ran through the piping and ran through all this, it was only going to be about 35 psi. And they made a video of it. Well, no, I won't say that. Anyway, so with 50 pounds, or I think they used 45 psi, and I'm not sure how many GPMs would. Here, let me go. There we go. So this thing right here, it just pooped out on the ground, just right here in front of the man. I mean, and we have the video of that. So then they turned it up to 100 psi. Again, they're videoing, and it went maybe a little bit further. Now, this is 200 psi pressure back at the pump. By the time it goes through the whole system and comes out this nozzle, and this is an adjustable nozzle. It can be set for 40 gallons per minute, it can be set for 30 gallons per minute, 24 gallons per minute. So anyway, so this is the maximum pressure that this thing will put out, and you can see he's washing this sludge and whatever this is here. He's washing it toward the trench, and we're washing it down to the end to go in the wet well. Now, that, friends and neighbors, is why we spent $175,000 to concrete line the bottom of that pond and spend $40,000 of the bond money to build this thing so that a man could stand out there by himself after we had a rain event and wash this stuff away. Now, everybody on council understood that. I mean, it's a common sense thing whenever you talk about it. The engineer explained it to us, our utility operator explained it to us. Pretty simple. Everybody got it except for one. But here is the proof. Now, I'm going to back up one. Okay, now, the only reason I brought you back to this picture, I mentioned before that we had a half acre here. Well, so I brought you back here just to give you an idea of how big this is. Now, this happens to be an aerator, and it floats. Whenever the water level comes up in the pond, that aerator rises up. You might see that little yellow ball right there. That's the float switch that turns that aerator on. When the water level gets up to that and it makes that float switch turn 90 degrees and float, it turns the power on to that so that it aerates the water, puts oxygen in it, and helps to cut down on the smell. But I brought you back here to show you this. This was 210 feet across here, and one of these sides is 151 and the other's 167. It could be the other way around. It's not that important. Again, what's important? That's a half an acre, a little bit more. And Councilman Marandino suggested more than once in the meeting that we discussed this, that, well, heck, I've got 500 feet of 3/4 inch water hose at my house. I just wash down my driveway. We can do the same thing. Well, so how long do you think it'd take to wash that down with a 3/4 inch water hose? Because it took 9 hours to wash it down with this high fluid water pressure system that we built. And Mayor, that concludes my discussion.
Do you have any pictures of one with a vinyl liner?
Pardon me?
Do you have any pictures of one with a vinyl liner, for been $150,000?
No, we didn't consider vinyl liner because the vinyl liner is not the correct use for this thing right here. Just like I showed you the night that you brought it up. Anybody with a pocket knife can cut that thing in a heartbeat. And can you imagine a half acre of a rubber vinyl liner out there going up and down like a sea animal or something, trying to wash that material across the vinyl liner? It's just not the correct usage for it. I know you didn't want to buy it at the time, but anybody can see how much simpler it's going to be to wash that down than a bottom fill with a rubber liner. Next question.
And what was the requirements for the TCE on the bottom of it? And what did we spend money on checking to make sure that we had clay there?
We spent $4,000 on a soil report, which was a requirement of the project to find out that we had the correct amount of clay or enough clay in the ground to act as a barrier to keep this stuff from soaking into the surrounding ground.
And what was the requirement for the TCE on the bottom?
I don't remember what the numbers of the clay was, but we had
He
it.
asked the question, I didn't.
I just feel like we're kind of beating a dead horse here.
We are, but I felt like this was worth going through. I'd say it was a fortuitous event that Mother Nature blew that plug out in time for this meeting.
And you can find out it's flushing down those big old lily pads.
Okay. I think we're ready to bring this to a vote.
There's no lily pads in there, bud. The water came up and went down. That's not lily pads.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve the alternate recommendation, which is the last one that she gave to us, the one that has the new minimums? Excuse me.
Not one of the budget.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Are y'all approving the budget tonight?
Need to do it in the
I
budget.
think, you're right.
But now that the lights are on, I'd like to point out one other
Okay,
thing
sorry.
on this document that she made here that has the different alternates to pay for this.
Yes, okay.
Now that the lights are on and the council can see their paperwork, I know that y'all couldn't see it up there. But one thing that's important to look at as you look down the first column here where it says 3,000 gallons. If you look down there, no matter what she's done with the numbers, everybody's until you get way down there, everybody, their monthly bill is $59, $58, $59 all the way down. Now, as you go across the page and look at the people that use 6,000 gallons, 9,000, 12,000, you can see how the water rate increases go up considerably from 20% increase to 25 to 30 to 45 to 60. You go across the page and you can compare it to the one above it, you can see how it, I'm not going to say penalizes, but they're going to be paying considerably more if you consider those rate increases that go up 25, 30, 45, or 60%. So, and like I mentioned a while ago, we do have a lot of people here. This is just the list of customers that we have here, and I didn't count them, but we have people that use 15,000 gallons, 18,000 gallons. One person was a high at 25,000 gallons. The point is, we have a lot of people that use between 6,000 and 9,000 gallons of water, and it's going to really affect those people. Yeah, okay, they can evidently afford to pay it because they use that much water, but all I'm saying is, the more you go up on those rates and go down on that fee, you're going to affect a lot of people over there too. So I only point that out.
Okay, well, let's go back and make a motion to, do I hear a motion to approve the budget as she has presented?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, we got a motion?
I'll second.
No second. Any further discussion about this budget?
Do we need to, when we approve this budget, do we need to approve the rate at the same time? Because I don't see that on the agenda. Can we approve it tonight?
Well, I think you'll have to, you could,
The rate is not on the budget. We'll put it that on the budget.
Yeah, I think that is not on the agenda.
Okay, so.
But that will also give you time to maybe get the ordinance for the fee.
Okay, so we can't approve this tonight,
What?
just
Can
a,
you weigh in on that, Counselor?
Anyway,
Well,
it just says.
does the details of the budget, does it have the revenue from the proposed rate?
It does.
Yes.
yeah.
It's got the last column reads proposed budget with fee adjustment. Proposed budget with fee adjustment. It's on the budget.
If they wait on both of them.
Well, I mean, then you've given, well, but you've given notice. I mean, in theory,
They can still approve everything in September.
right,
So
right.
you might want to do the ordinance and the rate and the budget at the same time.
Well, we're probably gonna have a little mini meeting to cancel our election.
Put all together.
So that we can do, we can do that and do this other.
We had to post the voting service for
Yeah.
first before we did
Yeah.
that.
That's what I'm just saying, we probably need to we could just do that.
I mean,
Right
I-
after the first, right after next week, we probably just do our, because we don't have any opposed candidates, so we posted that we were going to have an election. I mean, we did that at this budget meeting, we called for an election because that was the day we had to do that. And we didn't know whether we were gonna have one or not, so we had to go ahead and do that.
Right.
And so now then, we know we're not gonna need one, so we do need to go ahead and cancel that.
Right.
So we can just call a meeting and do that and let this be an agenda.
May I amend my motion?
Let me go back to something that Charlotte pointed out in asking the question. Do we need to have the ordinance drafted before we enact which one of these alternative pay schemes we're gonna use? That's what she was asking a minute ago.
No, I don't think so. I don't believe an ordinance for the rate increase.
Is it just a resolution?
For the fee to go where it needs to go.
Debt service fee.
You know, it's got the debt service fee,
And
which we need
restricting
to
the
go
use of
strictly
that
to debt.
fee only for debt service.
It's gotta be designated.
It has to be designated somehow. Restricted.
I mean, we don't wanna have another one if we don't have to, but
Yeah, I'm sort of, because there's been so much disclosure, because you had a meeting, but this is a new one. Because y'all have adopted, yeah, I mean, really, to belt and suspenders it, we probably should at least reach a resolution that, to prepare the ordinance, subject to posting an enactment. That way it gives guidance for the ordinance, so at least decide which option you want.
So,
I move that we,
And then table it for us to propose the ordinance and get it up.
I move that we vote to proceed with the proposed budget with fee adjustments using the alternative recommendation and table that for our next meeting where we will vote on it all at one time.
second the motion.
Yeah.
Did y'all second, did y'all raise my budget? Raise my budget? Is that a different budget? Different budget.
That's a different.
okay. Is there further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay, motion carried. Okay.
May I
So-
say one thing before we leave this? You mentioned something about canceling the election.
Yes.
Two of our men are here tonight. One representing Ward 2 is Doug Emmons in the back, and Bill Andrews representing Ward 3.
And Ward 1 is not here tonight, but Ms. Martha Lobo will be the new council person from Ward 1. So, that's three. Very, very nice candidates, or very nice, what do you call it? Upcoming council people, or whatever. Unopposed ones. Okay, so, now we turn to.
I'll keep it very brief.
Finish the subject.
I just want to give you guys a quick rundown of what we have coming up for community development. September 22nd will be the pet clinic. As Jill mentioned previously, it's going to be held in the church parking lot. As she mentioned, please notify friends and family. We want to have as many people as possible. Do not broadcast this across public Facebook channels. We do not want people to think that's a good opportunity to dump an animal out here. So friends and family, great. Strangers, no thanks. We just don't need them out here.
Say September 22nd.
September 22nd, 6:30, up at the church. The garage sale, community-wide garage sale will be October 15th. Citywide cleanup will be October 22nd. Decorating the park for the holidays will take place beginning November 19th. Anytime during that week after your help will be very much appreciated and very welcome. We will be having a parade, a Christmas parade, the evening of December 1st, that's a Thursday evening. And then we're gonna have our Christmas in the Park celebration on December 3rd. Flu clinic, 3rd. Flu clinic. Oh, the flu clinic, doggone it, man, right, October 5th. October 5th, I knew I put it on the calendar. October 5th is the flu clinic, and that will be taking place here at the Civic Center. Kim reminded me, I knew I was missing something.
Do you have a calendar page available with all these dates on it so people can mark their calendars? Or are we just relying on what y'all are saying?
No,
Yeah,
Kim,
it will all be on the website next week, on the city website, as well as on Facebook, and I'll be doing a mail out.
Should be able to do that.
Well, Kim,
You can memorize
the
everything
mail
I
out
said.
this week, I can go next week.
Okay, I need that.
I teach high school. I have too much going on.
Michelle,
Yes, sir.
has the city fixed the issue with the flu clinic? Because I cannot bring my daughter over here to get flu shots.
I don't know if they'll be allowing children.
Because they have it in the past, that's why I'm asking.
The doses,
Every
I
time
actually
they
never
turned us away.
Will they allow children or is it
The
adults?
exact same as it was last
Are
year.
y'all able to still put reminders on the water bill?
Yes.
So there you
Good,
go.
great.
Maybe we can get that.
Calendar page for city.
December 1st is the parade.
Everybody
The first
has one of
annual
those.
Christmas parade, so hopefully all decorate stuff. We're gonna have a 20 so that the lights on all parts, the four-wheelers, the cars kind of show up and it should be a fun thing. We'll push the button and light the park that way. And that's all for me.
Yeah, limited.